Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact video series. My name is Ryan Duffy and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we're going to talk about one of the larger industrial businesses that arose in Batavia, especially during the first half of the 20th century, and that is the Doehler-Jarvis Company. Now, the Doehler-Jarvis Company was created first in Brooklyn, but eventually moved to Batavia in the 1920s. And its main production was metal casting, especially in aluminum and brass, that it used for many different pieces, both household goods and industrial goods. And we actually will show you a few of those that we have in the collection here at the museum. And during World War II especially, they were a major arms and ammunition maker for the war effort. And we even have a couple pieces of that to show you, things that were made in Doehler-Jarvis factories that were meant to be used during World War II. Doehler-Jarvis would last in Batavia for about 60 years and would leave an indelible mark on the community and was a major employer for many decades. And many people got either their first jobs or made a long-standing career with working for Doehler-Jarvis. So we're going to show you a few of the pieces that we have here at the museum in our collection and tell you a little bit more about the history of the company. So here we'll begin by showing off a few different pieces of house goods that were made by Doehler-Jarvis, both here in Batavia and in other plants. But the history of Doehler-Jarvis can begin all the way back in 1908 in Brooklyn, when it was founded by Herman H. Doehler, and it was situated on Congress Street in Brooklyn. Now, he created the company after patenting a method of casting metals under pressure. And he worked for about a decade and a half in Brooklyn before moving to Batavia. And he moved to Batavia in 1921, mostly because one of his major contracts was with Eastman Kodak in Rochester, and it made more sense to be closer to them, as transportation would be a lot less, and at the time Batavia was a transportation hub. And by 1924 they had also opened up plants in Toledo, Ohio, and Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Now, when they came to Batavia, they actually moved into the old Warden Monument Works on Evans Street and operated out of there. But within a year, they also added more buildings. These ones were on Robertson Street, which was the old home of the Batavia Rubber Company. Now, before coming to Batavia, Doehler had made most of his castings in aluminum, and it was the aluminum casting machinery that was moved to the workshop on Evans Street. Then he began to cast in brass in 1825, and that is what was done in the Robertson Street buildings. In 1925, there were about 250 workers on payroll, and it was one of the larger employers in Batavia. However, he told the Chamber of Commerce that he would be able to find more workers, as he felt there was a shortage in his plant, if he was able to create more housing. So as a result, he encouraged building on Vernon Avenue and on Union Street, and as well as some houses on Bank Street that were specifically built for Doehler workers to live in. Now, as the 1920s continued on, the buildings for Doehler factories would be improved and built upon. The Evans Street building was rebuilt in concrete and steel in 1927 and 1928, though it wouldn't be used basically until the beginning of World War II. And it would actually be torn down in the 1970s to make room for parking for the ice arena on Evans Street. And they also made additions on the Robertson Street buildings, where the original building was actually completely torn down and rebuilt. And this included a large storage building along the railroad tracks. And at that area in 1945, they also built a magnesium foundry, as well even building their own gas tanks to prevent any shutdown from a gas shortage, which had happened in the 1930s. Now, there were other difficulties involved, as skilled workers were very hard to find, especially in the area. So Doehler, along with the Batavia City School District, actually created a metal trade school, which would teach young high school students the tools of the trade that they could instantly start working for Doehler. And this actually operated out of the West Main Street school building until 1961, when it moved into the high school, and then eventually under the BOCES program, where it continued on still. And this would be an instant source of workforce for the company. As mentioned before, the Doehler Company was a major producer of armaments during World War II, and they did this under the name of the Batavia Steel Products Corporation, and they made incendiary shells for the United States Navy that would be used in the war against Japan. And this would be recognized by the armed forces, as Doehler would receive several awards for the cooperation with the military and the excellent production that was done. Also during World War II, in 1944, Doehler purchased the W.B. Company of Grand Rapids, Michigan, which had previously specialized in automobile trim, furniture, and appliances. However, the new company would be the fourth plant in the Doehler conglomerate, which is why the company would then be known as Doehler-Jarvis. And at the end of the war, it brought a rush of peacetime orders, and they would turn out large castings such as bimetal brake drums and six-cylinder engines. And it would also bring a new metal to be used, and that was the use of magnesium, which caused a large influx of orders and caused Doehler-Jarvis to grow significantly in Batavia. Following World War II, the Doehler-Jarvis Company was actually purchased by the National Lead of New Jersey, and they took over all four plants of the company. And National Lead had subsidiary companies in South Asia and in Australia, which allowed Doehler to sell to new markets that they had previously never really been able to touch. And Mr. Doehler himself was actually sharing more of company responsibility along with other plant managers. And he would be in this role until he died in 1964. However, as with many other companies that were involved in heavy industry in the area, in the 1970s and 80s was not always kind to them. In 1970, a rumor arose that the whole Batavia plant might leave town, and thus the Chamber of Commerce raised over $100,000 to build additional parking for the company, which actually made Robertson Street disappear altogether. In 1977, it seemed that they would leave again, and all of the aluminum casting machinery was moved to other factories, and Batavia only kept the magnesium, which reduced the workforce to about 200. And in 1981, National Lead moved all office workers from Batavia to Tennessee, leaving only a modest workforce here. In July of that year, the Batavia plant was offered for sale. And though they had many purchasers lined up, no sales were actually completed. And in February of 1982, National Lead actually told all the workers at the plant that they would close in February, which is eventually what happened, ending Doehler-Jarvis' time here in Batavia. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of our Artifact video series. And in case you've missed any of our previous one, as now we're well over 60 made, you can go back and check them out on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum. And if you really enjoy our content, you can always subscribe and be sure to be notified as soon as we release more videos. But if you had your interest piqued by any of the artifacts that you've seen in these videos, be sure to stop by the museum and check them out for yourselves, and you can ask us even more questions about the artifacts and the stories behind them.